So everybody's got our screen here. So we'll kick this off real quick. So today we'll be talking about M365, talk about some scriptable offense and really show sort of the ease of which you can pull off some pretty sophisticated attacks against M365 with initial access. But I've actually got a whole agenda here we can talk through. So we'll start off, we'll go over current events, talk about what's happening in the world and the industry, how it relates to cybersecurity and everybody here. Edwin here is going to walk us through some abuse of initial access tokens. And then we'll pivot over to Faith to talk us through sort of what happens next after that and what we see behind the scenes at Huntress. And then we'll go over where to find us next and we'll answer some questions y'all may have. But before we start, as a quick introduction. So those of you that don't know me, my name is Chris Henderson. I am the Senior Director of Threat Operations here at Huntress. So I run both internal security as well as the humans that derive the threat intelligence, action that, and then write that into detections that help protect all of our customers. I'm joined today by Faith, who I'll let introduce herself.
Hello, I'm Faith. I'm based in the UK. The accent is not put on. I'm a security operations analyst from the UK team. So I just run through alerts. So that's what we'll be talking about today. M365 alerts that we see on a daily basis.
We're also joined today by Edwin. Edwin, I'll let you give your intro.
Hey, everybody. I'm a security consultant for Trustedsec. So I do the Azure cloud penetration testing. So totally on the red side and having fun up in the clouds. Absolutely love it.
Awesome. Well, I really appreciate you two joining me today. I think we got some cool topics to cover. Before we jump into all of that and fun demos, etc., I figured let's take some time, talk about some current events, what's going on in the world, how it could apply to everybody. Let's start off. I don't know if everybody saw the EPA warning about critical water systems. I know critical infrastructure is a hot topic. Historically, I've seen most of these topics be surrounding the sort of electrical grids, other critical infrastructure. It's interesting to see it pivot over to water supply. I don't know, Edwin, Faith, thoughts on sort of why this topic is shifting, what you've seen in the surrounding states of these?
Seeing if Faith is going to go first or me. I can definitely, give my thoughts, just around kind of some of this. This actually takes me back a couple years during the Colonial Pipeline hit and the amount of disruption that caused in the U.S. And, just gravitating towards other critical infrastructure sectors. A lot of these places are just running some older OT hardware, definitely stuff that can be exploitable on the outside, as CISA has warned a couple different times within the past few months about Volt Typhoon and the type of techniques and tactics that they're using to gain entryway, into these places. And it's a lot of the same type stuff where a weakness is found externally. I think in this case, I think an appliance was possibly exploited that was running some older code. And then they're laterally moving in and using, living off the land techniques and just burrowing themselves into critical infrastructure assets that, ultimately can just cause just a lot of chaos depending on what the attacker's motive is. So that's just initially my first thought and why these are such hot targets. The other issue too is with the subject of ransomware, especially if water systems were to become ransomwared. That would be a very, very huge public problem. And depending on where, when, and how somebody was hit, I hate to think that somebody just wouldn't go ahead and pay to get those systems back up and running, just because of the amount of chaos that would actually cause.
Yeah, I think when you look at hospitals, similar sort of soft soft targets there, bunch of embedded OT that's really difficult to upgrade if possible at all. Right, you see like the imaging software in hospitals, it's exorbitantly expensive to replace an MRI, and getting an updated MRI just so you don't have a Windows XP server running it's pretty pricey endeavor. I can only imagine for these water control systems the costs associated with updating some of these. Sort of not to excuse it, but at least understand why these vulnerabilities may continue to exist and not be hardened over time. Faith, anything to add there?
I was just thinking when you're talking about hospitals, fun fact I learned the other day is that the NHS in the UK is one of the biggest users of fax machines. So that sort of tells you the sort of difference in technologies. I mean, we've had the WannaCry, of course, in the UK that went after the NHS. Huge. You have to think about, it's like maximum chaos possible. Like the incentive to give in pay is just heightened so much. So yeah, going after water systems, it's just critical infrastructure, and it's not great.
Awesome. A little bit of a lighter topic, but still topical and current. Apex Legend was allegedly hacked. You know, from what we see, it doesn't seem as though there's an actual RCE within Apex Legends. I don't know if you guys have further details on that. Want to elaborate? But I don't know, Faith, we can start with you. What are your takeaways here?
Interesting. I think it's so fun to see. I think the thing about this is it's like it creates so much interest in online as well. It's like, what a great tagline for an article. It's like Apex Legends, everyone knows that. Everyone hates when their video games get attacked. So it's gonna create a lot of buzz. Whether there's anything to it, yet to be seen. It's an interesting hot topic. I guess that's why we're talking about it now. But yeah.
I think it's right when you look at a lot of offensive security professionals got their start in hacking in video games, cheating, so very similar to the ransomware operators. You know, anecdotally, a lot of them got their start in aimbotting and cheating of video games, and so it's interesting to see like the tactics that are being used, historically for what have been kids learning their entryway into the offensive security world. Their tactics seem to be getting more advanced, and so I don't know if that's the more advanced players working their way back down into the video games and going back to where they're used to, or is the next generation of ransomware operators and affiliate operators becoming more advanced, right? Like, are we seeing the increase in skill of the next generation of operators? I don't know, Edwin, you said you were doing some reading on this the other night.
Yeah, it's half of it's just a little. I don't want to say funny, but maybe more along the lines of just weird and interesting because, with the amount of people that play Apex Legends, if there is an RCE, that could translate to, a number of computers being compromised. But, kind of on the flip side with gaming too is, really just two things. Everyone wants the maximum amount of performing whenever they're launching their games. And, sometimes that may entail of turning off like just common things like antivirus that may open you up to just different things, even if you browse a website with a malicious ad. But, the second thing, and anybody that does gaming heavily is just always looking for an additional edge of, gaining over their opponents, and whether it's by cheating or manipulating the game or whatnot. So that was really just kind of my only thoughts about this, it's just interesting, but not a whole lot is really just kind of known.
Yeah, I mean,
speaking of
everybody trying to get an edge, right? In this case, we see, Call of Duty hackers downloading malware as part of the package to install the hack. And while this is certainly not a new thing, I think this is the first that I've seen these aimbots specifically going after Bitcoin wallets. And so previously it was pivoting your machine into a larger botnet for part of a larger attack elsewhere. But the malware behind these cheats and bots, et cetera, seems to be getting more advanced. Cool. We can jump to the next one real quick. I don't know if anybody saw that Black Hat, there's now a $10 million bounty out for the leaders there. There might be some affiliates also with a equal bounty out. And so I don't know that the US are the only people looking for Black Hat. I don't know if the larger audience has heard, but they pulled a sort of a cash and grab and took quite a large payout and then disappeared, owing some people some money. So I think it's really interesting that, yes, while the US is offering a $10 million bounty, I think we might not be the only ones.
Definitely. I think I saw something the other day which was saying that cybercrime and as an industry is one of the biggest money makers there is around, which is just fascinating. Like when you work in cybercrime, well, I don't work in cybercrime, cybersecurity. It's interesting that the things that you see like on an everyday basis, you're like, wait, this is a business operation. There was a hacking group in the well, not necessarily the UK, called Lapsus. And it's just a lot of teenage kids. And one kid, 18, he was 18, was arrested in Oxford because he apparently he did a bad business deal. And so they just doxed him. And it's just fascinating to see. It's like a oiled machine. My confirmed Apex hacker. Thank you, Tim.
I think a lot of people forget the business side of who we're defending against. That these are, varying everywhere from SMB level SMB affiliates all the way up through enterprise level ransomware operators. And I think treating them as such, they're going to have a lot of the same problems that we have. Burning, trying to justify ROI from an initial access broker versus the ransomware operator they're procuring their ransomware from. So it'll be interesting to see how that conversation evolves over the next months and years. Cool. With that, Edwin, I would love to hand it over to you. Walk us through some explanations, demos, etc. I'll go on mute, let you talk, and just sort of give me the ding if you need me to move the slides.
Sure, absolutely. Hey, thank you, everybody. So today we're going to be talking about abusing access tokens, and really kind of more specifically around those access tokens is how can we get around conditional access policies to either give us some bearer tokens, access token, refresh tokens on the back end, but even more importantly, what can we do to gain GUI access as well to an individual if something like this is you run into. So during a pen test, especially if you land on creds with a weak password, depending on the maturity of the organization, some will just do obviously the bare minimum where they're trying to MFA all their users, and then beyond that is just really kind of more legwork around securing people and what type of devices that they use. So what we're staring at right here is a conditional access policy that sometimes I'll run into. Typically what it means is they are more than likely using a form of conditional access that is either locking down the devices that can access the tenant environment, or B, they may have a control around device compliance. They may be running the two together. But typically when I see this, usually one of the two is just really kind of at play. So we'll be stepping through this a little bit further about what's going on, ways to test how to get around these potential errors if there's a gap in the conditional access policy environment. So we can go ahead and click on to the next slide here. And this is just a sample conditional access policy that I'm going to be demoing in my lab tenant today. And hopefully everybody can see it okay. If not, I'm just going to describe really kind of just what it is. So Microsoft wants everybody to do cloud native join enforcement into their environment. And currently, as it exists today, there is no there's no conditional access enforcement, or at least template enforcement, if you will, around Microsoft Entra joined devices. There's a few different ways that devices get registered in an Entra ID environment. One is just called Entra ID registered, and that's where someone will go into maybe a personal computer, and then they'll hook up their work account, and then it'll get labeled as Entra ID registered. A different take on this is doing cloud native join, which is just really kind of an out-of-the-box experience where the user will type in their cloud credentials, and they'll register the authorized device in the Entra ID environment. And what this will do is this will cause the device to be Entra ID joined. And so if someone is doing just cloud native enforcement, they may be doing it via a device filtering policy where they don't want people to register personal like laptops and desktops in their environment. And B, they may want to go ahead and enforce a cloud native join so that assets and resources are not being accessed on personal platforms such as device and laptops. So I'm kind of leaving mobile out for a moment here, because that is a whole separate animal that I don't want to get into, at least not at the moment anyway. So there's nothing bad with this conditional access policy. If there are other appropriate conditional access policies stacked beside it that prevents from what I'm gonna do, at least what I'm gonna do here shortly, from occurring in the environment. So there's definitely some caveats around this type of thing. So if we go ahead and just flip over to the next slide. So this was taken in my lab environment. This is device platform filtering. I got a lovely little graphic on the right that really kind of how I picture device platform filtering, especially if it goes just kind of off the rails in terms of how many conditional access policies that you have. You can definitely start running into conditional access policy gaps where an attacker, even a pen tester, may be able to break through some of those barriers. So as you're doing some of this thing, this is kind of the sprawl that I really kind of envision as far as around conditional access when you start relying very heavily on device platform filtering within an enterprise environment. I'm just looking at my notes just to make sure that there's nothing else I wanted to do here with the screenshot. I don't believe there is. I talked about conditional access sprawl. So I think now we can get into some of the more fun stuff, the demo story time that I'm getting ready to tell here. So we can go ahead and flip to the next slide.
All right.
So one of the first things that I'm going to do here with this live demo, and I'm going to share out my screen here in a minute, is a user agent, OS2 Warp user agents, and I'm going to show you how they're applicable to getting around conditional access. This is a very weird user agent to use. If you see it used in your environment at all, even if you go on a KQL query hunt, there is something that is clearly going on, and it's not normal. So if you're not old like me, back in the 90s, OS2 Warp first came out. So flip over to 2023. I use it in the cloud. So it's a very, very useful agent for conditional access. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to share out my screen. So give me a moment. And I just did this earlier, so this was easy to do. Okay. So I'm at my screen. Let me get rid of my notes here. So I'm going to go ahead and we're just going to pretend that I have password sprayed an environment and I've landed into some valid credentials with a end user. So our end user here, his name is Ben Smith. Here I see it's valid, so it's switched over to the password field. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put in my compromised password that I was able to guess. I'm going to sign in. So naturally from here, what we see is what we saw in the slide deck is that I cannot access this resource. So by no stretch of the means, at least the way that I approach things is that this is just a dead in the water method and I need to move on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to sign out of the account real quick. Close my browser. I'm going to reopen it because it flushes the cache and everything out of Firefox. I'm going to go back over to office.com. And then what I'm going to do here is I'm going to use this lovely little Firefox add-in called a user agent switcher. It has some very fantastic user agents already built in. I get very, very weird with user agents whenever I run into this scenario, just to see if something sticks, whether I start emulating a valid mobile device like iOS or Android, or if I'm doing something in this case where I know it's not accepting a Linux agent because we already attempted to log in. So the next thing, what I do really just kind of on my list here is, hang on here, pull up my notes. I got to grab a user agent. Okay, so this is the OS2 Warp user agent that I'm going to apply to basically all of my container within Firefox. So I'm going to go ahead and just refresh here real quick and see that it's up over here. So now I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to log in with my compromised user again. Okay, so different screen this time, different bypass. If you recall from the slide deck earlier, via device platform filtering roles, I'm only filtering Windows, Mac, and Linux. The fun thing about all this is OS2 Warp is not evaluated under any of those conditions. And I'll get into more mitigations at the end of my demo here, just to really kind of explain things and wrap things up. So at this point, I've clearly ran into an account that has not registered with conditional access. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go on ahead and get out of here just real quick. I am going to register MFA off to the side. I know we got a lot of viewers on the phone here, so I really don't want anybody to get funny and scan one of my QR codes here for me. So
someone on our team definitely would do that.
So bear with me here a moment. Live demos, it's always fun. There's a lot of things a lot of moving parts here for this kind of hack. But basically, what I'll do really kind of at this point, if nobody is registered for MFA, obviously the attacker is going to register for MFA on the user's behalf, because that's what anyone else would do from really just kind of an account takeover, if you will. So I'm just responding back to my code here that it's valid and I should be registering for MFA, notification approved. Okay. So I am done, and let me go on ahead and open up this again. And we're just going to basically rinse and repeat here with what I did with the user agent. So I'm going to go ahead and populate this OS2 warp user agent back in. Okay, it's applied. Go to office.com. As you see here now, I've registered under the attacker MFA. So I'm just going ahead and I am granting myself. And now we're in here in the M365. I got this demo environment just loaded with goodies here because you see here I have documents and Excel spreadsheets that have passwords. That's a very, very common privilege escalation tactic that I'll do, or at least where I pivot to next, because I'll venture to say about 90% of the time I find I'll usually find credentials stored in SharePoint Online that are just in plain text. Normally they're just either in Excel documents or they're in OneNotes, and they're just really kind of there for the taking to do any type of privilege escalation. So at least from the GUI end, and I wanted to do this first because the second part of this demo is really just more around token theft, and we may have some people in the audience that they may know what they are, but they may not understand what they do or how attackers really kind of translate them into getting access into different services. And we'll beat on Microsoft Graph with what I'm going to do next here. So at least from this demo perspective, we're in as the user, but how can we expand upon that? So I'm going to use a fork of token tactics. There's two different forks out there right now. There's token tactics, what I consider V1. It's a fantastic gentleman by the name of Steve Barash wrote that tool. Use it quite a bit. The difference between V1 and V2, V2 supports OS warp agents or OS warp user agents. So naturally, we're going to have to do that if we want to expand everything, because even though we are under the GUI, an attacker will probably pivot over towards tokens to solidify their access more. So even if the user gets marked as compromised and someone in the SOC or help desk just changes the password, if no sessions get revoked, then that access really just kind of remains. And this is just really another technique to have in an attacker's tool belt on maintaining persistent access to the account that they compromise. So what I'm going to do here, I'm just going to do a simple command with token tactics. I'm just telling it to get an Azure token over to MS Graph, and I'm telling it right now to use a device OS2 agent. So I'm going to go ahead and hit enter. If you want to think about this in terms of device code phishing, this is absolutely applicable for that route too, where if you send a user a device code phishing email, and the thing that is very, very devastating about those attacks is there's literally nothing malicious that's embedded in a device code phishing email. It all goes back to legitimate Microsoft services. So if you look at it from an attacker standpoint, or at least a compromised end user standpoint, if they get one of those types of emails asking to go to this website, Microsoft.com/device login, they see that it's going to MicrosoftOnline.com. That's a legitimate URL. So if the end user does put that in, I'm already signed in here. So from an attacker standpoint, now I've abused this user agent, and I'm going to sign into Microsoft Office. And the beautiful thing over here on the left-hand side of my screen, I get some tokens back. So what do we do with these tokens? So generally on the Entra ID portal side, at least I like to think the majority of enterprises do this. Some still don't. But we're going to assume here for a minute that this end user does not have access to the Entra ID portal at all. It's locked down to administrators only. And this is kind of where the weaponization of token theft kind of comes into play, and how you can use these to gain access into the Entra ID environment and just start extracting everything out. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to just do a simple invoke refresh token over to Graph. There's some slight differences between, right now I just have a MS Graph token, but I want to go ahead and I want to move over to just a regular Graph token, because the tool set that I'm going to use, it's going to need a token from that environment. So I'm just going to put in my target domain here real quick. I see that I have a bear. You're not going to see a bunch of tokens kind of flip out from this standpoint. That's totally okay, because they're in variables. And what I'm looking for here is I just need a straight line access token. So I'm going over to Graph. Here is my access token. I am definitely going to grab that guy, and I'm going to switch over here to a tool called Road Recon. And I got my command line syntax structure already set up. I could use a shell script here to kind of automate the process. But me and Chris were talking yesterday, and he's like, hey, if you can just kind of walk people through this without using those shell scripts, that's awesome too. So it really kind of slows the attack behavior down. So that's what I'm going to do here. So I'm just going to run Road Recon off, and I'm going to give it my access token. Okay. We see here that the token has been written to an auth file in my current directory. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and just do a Road Recon gather. And what this is doing via token, this is going against Graph, and it is extracting all the information that is available to me as a low privilege user in the Entra ID environment. So it's going to grab users, groups, applications in use. It's even going to give me devices the end users are using. So it's going to give me a ton of information for really just kind of the next attack that I can do to kind of escalate some privileges. So on top of that, because we ran into some conditional access issues, normally users don't have rights to view conditional access via Entra ID. But here, what I can do, since I've already populated my Road Recon database, I can parse through that database, and I can tell it to extract the conditional access policies out for me. So here I have just a Road Recon directory. So let me just go into that here real quick. So I've extracted all my conditional access policies in the tenant. It'll even tell me if some things are disabled or if they're in report only. I see here we have some service account restrictions in the environment, so I may not be able to pop a service account if I'm able to do some lateral movement in. But this gives me a ton of intelligence from an attacker standpoint to know what I need to avoid with conditional access if I'm trying to avoid triggering any type of alarms and whatnot. So the other thing that we can do here is go into the Road Recon GUI. This will spin up a little bit of a flash gap right here. So I'm going to go here. And now what you can see here from just like a high level overview, you see the amount of users, groups, applications, service principals, devices that is available in this Entra tenant. So from an attacker perspective, if I'm doing like any type of phishing, password spraying, now all of a sudden, because I have initial access, I can really kind of expand on those methods. So this is just a very, very, I don't want to say simple way, but one way that an attacker will abuse these types of tokens to get into other areas of Azure or Entra ID to extract some useful information. So I'm gonna, I guess I'll keep going. We had another slide deck on just basically demo number 2, but I'm just gonna explain it here so I don't stop sharing my screen. So this is just kind of step 1. Step 2, and I think this is very, very pervasive in cloud environments, is that malicious device registrations are a very growing problem. Attackers are using them to gain even more persistent access in the environment. And the interesting thing about doing a malicious device registration, if you know what you're doing, you can actually forge your own primary refresh token remotely without the need for any type of user interaction, especially if you've already compromised the account and you've registered MFA on behalf of your attack, just on behalf of the attackers. So what I'm going to do here is I have some shell scripts written to cut down on the amount of time that this is going to take. And this is really going to kind of take place in 2 different parts here. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to go ahead and get out of Firefox. And I'm going to run this first shell script. And the reason why I'm running shell scripts is this does contain an embedded password. So I'm not going to be showing that here. But what I am going to be showing here is how all this works and flows from a command line perspective. So let me go ahead and run this. And I use these shell scripts a lot just to kind of automate my attack. So what I've done here is I've just registered a device, and it is saying that it is saving that information in my primary refresh token that I'm going to be forging. Here's really kind of just step 2 here, if you will. Let me get into my Authenticator app and accept this. All right. So we got a few different tokens. So on the back end, what we've just done is we have registered a device on behalf of the user. We've extracted, since we were able to register that device, we were able to extract basically the keys, the certificates that come along as part of that process out as well. And then we were able to craft some special refresh tokens for our PRT that we're going to be doing. So What we're going to be doing next is we're going to be doing an enrichment process, if you will, where we're going to take this special refresh token, because this has an MFA claim already embedded into it. So no password here is needed. But what you're seeing right now is I'm calling these keys that I created for this computer account. I'm going to paste it in. And then I'm going to run that second script. I'm going to run script 2. And then now we've fully enriched our PRT. It's been written to this file right here that is available on the system. So really kind of the final thing that we need to do here, now that we got all these moving pieces going, if we look at this from a device perspective, now we don't need to do anything with any type of user agents. I can call the office.com URL right here, give it my primary refresh token that I had just forged. So my browser is going to pop up again here with RoadTX. With luck, what we're going to see here is I'm going to go ahead and sign in. And look at that. We were now we've just automatically signed in as the user. MFA claims, everything else, don't need to worry about any of that anymore. I've bypassed the cloud native join conditional access policy, and now I'm fully in as this user with a now a malicious device with just basic full 90-day access to this user, unless I all of a sudden I get evicted. So this is a very, very powerful attack technique to use as well. So the demo gods were fortunately with me on this. Faith is clapping. So I'm really, really super glad that all that went off without a hitch, because there's just a lot of moving parts around it. Chris, I'm looking at time here. I want Faith to do her stuff. If you can pull up the slide deck, I'm just going to talk about just a couple remediations real quick that we can do here.
Yeah, we got it.
Yep. So as far as defense mitigations, the first thing that you should do out of the gate, and if you're not doing them, you need to. This first one is a really quick win. It's available as a conditional access policy template. It's called block access to unknown or unsupported device platforms. That will prevent someone like me from using an OS2 warp agent to bypass that conditional access policy that we've done. The other thing is require MFA for device registrations. I probably don't see that nearly enough either. That is just another stopgap too, that if somebody is trying to pivot towards registering their own device, but they don't have full control over the compromised user, they don't have an MFA application that's registered as the user, that's going to stop any type of device registrations cold that way too. So there's more enhanced things that you can obviously do, but right here, my main focus is just really kind of the bare minimum. So the other thing in conditional access, require MFA for any type of change to your security information, to your accounts. If at all possible, limit that to trusted locations. I don't know if everybody can really do that or not, but if not, at a bare minimum, make sure you have MFA on that too. And that's available as a conditional access policy template that you can pull from Entra ID. Something that is currently in preview right now because as you saw what I did with a just basically a device code phish, and what I can do with device codes to get tokens back, there is something in preview right now called block device code flow in authentication flows. I've tested that in my tenant. Hopefully it'll be ready for prime time later this year. I know there are a couple of people that have had issues with it. But anyway, what that'll do is that will stop people from, even if they do get phished with the device code, that will stop that attack path vector, so that it renders device code phishing just really kind of just useless in general. And last but not least, modifying conditional access policies. Please put them in report mode first. Do not cause a production issue to yourself. Don't get yourself locked out. Don't get your users locked out. Put them in report only first. Make sure you get all the kinks worked out from your conditional access policy templates. And with that, that's my demo. That's everything on my side.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Edwin. That last one is perfect. Don't want to cause an availability incident trying to close up your confidentiality ones. Yep. So perfect. With that, we can pass it over to Faith. Talk to us a little bit about sort of what happens after all of this.
Yeah, we're going to cover some of the common things that we see every day in the SOC at Huntress, what we sort of see. So we're going to look at malicious inbox rules. I promise I'll try and make them fun. Malicious MFA ads. We'll have a look at what that kind of can look like. And some application abuse. How exciting. Okay, so first on our list is malicious inbox rules. So this is common tactics used by threat actors once they're in the environment to conceal themselves and to get the information that they want to get a hold of. Right, so first on the list, if we go to the next slide, is disrupting the flow. So one of the things that we see a lot is, so in this case, what we've got is an inbox rule that was added via VPN. So this is our setup. Our legitimate user is coming from North Carolina. Our bad user is coming from Ontario. I thought Canadians were nice. Anyway, next slide. Right, so one thing they'll do is they'll just mark everything as red and move it to a weird folder. In this case, it's a partner email. So this could be, the example I like to use is, this is a mattress company and this is springs.com. And they're forwarding all of the emails to the conversation history folder, and they're marking them as red. So the person that is meant to be viewing these emails can't see them anymore. And you'll see the inbox name is full stop, comma, or comma, full stop, comma. So it's something that's really weird, but sort of gets past people. And yeah, that's how one way they conceal themselves. Next slide, please. Right. Oh, RSS feeds. I don't know if anyone remembers Blogspot. There was always a little link you could click to put everything into an RSS feed. This is another sort of directory that people have forgotten about, but what attackers will do is they'll mark all your emails as red, forward them to the RSS feeds. This enables them to just sort of, they know where they've gone. You don't know where your emails have gone, but they can have a look through, see what's going on, and what they want to do is insert themselves into the mail flow. So they'll sit in the environment and they will wait. And what they're waiting for is normally for an invoice of some kind. And what they can do is they can go into the invoice, take it, replicate it, and just change the bank details, which is quite scary. And then next slide, we see data exfil. This was a recent inbox rule, which was actually quite interesting. So sometimes instead of sitting in the environment, what they like to do is forward emails to an external email address. So here we've got, I think the inbox rule name is XT. And we're forwarding all of our emails that involve invoice, IBAN, wire instructions. All of these things are getting forwarded straight to bad at outlook.com. You may be thinking, Faith, why did you censor a bad external email address? You never know. People set up test rules. I don't want to at them. I don't want to expose them. So that's why that's happened. So that's inbox rules. Next, we have malicious MFA ads. So this is how we set up persistence. So if you think about it, if an attacker gets into your environment and they're able to add their own phone, I mean, Edwin was literally just showing us, it's not great. All of your authorization codes are just going to some random phone somewhere. So I thought I'd show you what that can look like from the SOC perspective. So here is a sort of classic example. You'll normally have a sort of a login that's out of the ordinary. How out of the ordinary that looks depends. Sometimes you'll get like a VPN someone's never used. They'll log in using that, or they'll come in from a data center, or sometimes it looks perfectly fine, but it's definitely not. In this case, we've seen, so the value for this is the strong authentication phone app detail, and we've got the old value and the new value. So this way I can sort of show what's happened here. So the old value was an iPhone SE 2nd generation. That was removed and replaced by an iPhone SE 3rd generation. I'm very happy for this person. They've updated their phone. So, oh yeah, sorry, Dre's pointed out. This is real stuff that we've seen in the Huntress SOC that we see every single day, but don't worry, I've anonymized it. It's not just me running around in an environment. And then what they'll do is they'll sort of add you'll see a modified user account event, and that will be just what kind of authentication that they are adding, which I think is shown in the next slide. Yes. If you're a nerd like me, you look around at method types a lot. This method type here, 5067, is a push notification. So someone signed themselves up for push notification for their MFA devices, which is interesting if you're me. Right, and we can go on to the next slide. Right, so if you're trying to understand, like, well, why do I care whether someone's added their own MFA device? I feel like this is a great example. Another malicious thing we see with MFA ads is sometimes attackers will link a device with no details. All the details are void. No device token, it's just all void. And sorry, I'm laughing because my colleagues are in the chat. So here in this case, we see someone's logged in via Pia VPN. They've added their own device. So before there was no MFA device linked, and they've added their own, and all the details are void and it's no device. The next login we see is the legitimate user trying to access their account. And the error, the 0365 audit logon error, is user strong authentication required interrupt. This means someone has tried to log into their account, but they have been blocked by MFA. So the person has sort of blocked them from entering their own account. The threat actor has almost a better security setup than the original user, which is ironic, I think. We can move on to the next slide. Application abuse. Now we're going to do a bit of learning full circle here. So when we're in the SOC, we often see people use certain applications in order to elevate their privileges within the environment. So if we have some examples. This was a recent case, actually. Right. Sorry for my unhinged scribbles. I sometimes feel like, you know, that scene with the guy with all the string, the red string on the board. And yes, that's me when it comes to my screenshots. So the first thing we see is a data center login. So for me, I see that user agent and red flags going off. I noticed Dre said in the chat earlier, if you are threat hunting, a lot of sort of context comes from, well, you get a couple of things, but user agents are a really good way. If you see some rogue user agents, we have some, there are some sort of like, we get things like Python and weird user agents that pop up and we can filter out the bads from there. So this, normally when I see that MSIE, that always, there's something going on here. So the next thing we see is a failed login. And this is why I always like to see the logon error, because I want to see why did you fail? Because sometimes what used to throw us off is the person would appear to fail to log in. We go, oh, so it's fine, they didn't get access. But the reason that they didn't get access was delegation does not exist, which means that the application did not exist on the host, right? And what happens next is we see that an application is added, but with specific permissions. So in this case, it's EM client. EM client can be used legitimately. I'm very sorry, James, I'm going after your favorite application, but sometimes it can be used illegitimately. So in this case, the permission that's been assigned is IMAP access user all. There's a great website called Graph Explorer that will tell you what a lot of these permissions mean, because of course this is all based from Microsoft Graph. But in this case, it allows the application the same access to the user's inbox as someone signed in via IMAP protocol. So it's a bit shady. So, and then we see after this application is linked, we're able to log in from New Jersey again, which is not great because we've already established this New Jersey login is a little bit suspicious for us. And then in the next slide, we're going to come full circle. What a teachable moment. They had a weird MFA instance come up, which was fascinating. So we see before this account had everything going for it, guys. It had a weird VPN logon. It had a data center logon. In this case, we see them using IPVanish VPN. They had never used this service before. They logged in via here, and then we see that the iPhone 14 Pro is changed. It becomes an iPhone S, and we're a bit confused. I would like to point out, hackers have better phones than I do. I don't know what payment plan they're on, but I'm interested. Although this is linking back to what I said earlier about working in cybercrime instead of cybersecurity. You should watch what I'm saying. And then after that, we start to see the data center login that linked to the application being added, so on and so forth. I thought that was quite interesting. We saw both things in one go. So yeah, I think that is the end.
Excellent. That covers it. Awesome. Edwin and Faith, I know we'll do questions in a second here. For everybody that joined us today, I really appreciate it. We're cutting it right to the wire, which is why I'm very quickly going into this very next section. But if any of you want to come experience any of this content live, we are on the road. And so we'll be in Orlando coming up actually tomorrow, and then Chicago later in the month, as well as Atlanta. If any of you ever want to track where we are going to be for live content, just please go to huntress.com/upcoming events. We'd love to see you and meet you. And I'm sure our marketers would love to try to sell you something as well, but hopefully educate you along at the same time. Edwin and Faith, thank you very much. We do have time for probably 1 or 2 questions here. Let's see. This one's got an upvote. Somebody's asking about a recurring calendar invite. I will have to let Alexis get back to you on that one. Let's see. Edwin, high enough security has been has had a big impact on the friendliness of the general business user for M365. I think the question here is like, what is the balance that you have found that is good between user friendliness and user security? I will go out on a limb and say if you have users that are not wanting to do MFA because it is inconvenient, that you should go educate them that is a terrible idea, and the inconvenience of getting breached is significantly worse than MFA. But to that, there is probably some middle ground beyond that. Edwin, I don't know if you want to chime in.
Yeah, so I know after COVID the dynamics has changed. A lot of people work remote. Trying to secure those remote workers, I'm sure it have been incredibly difficult for some enterprises. But just some things to maybe just food for thought anyway, in terms of making people experience MFA prompts less. Definitely around devices, go down the path of getting some device trust around whether it's hybrid Entra ID joined, where it's joined to a traditional Active Directory network, or if it's cloud native joined. There's nothing wrong with cloud native join. All I was demoing at this point is identifying a conditional access gap where we weren't blocking unknown or unsupported devices. I find that having that SSO experience around each use case is a lot better. I'm not talking about the seamless SSO option in Entra ID Connect, but if you're doing hybrid joined as well as Entra ID joined, you can back things, especially on the cloud native side, you can back things with like Windows Hello for Business, and make that user experience a little bit more palatable, where maybe they're not changing their passwords near as much, but you're also establishing some type of device trust around their system. Definitely, if somebody is having trouble with MFA, that's an entirely separate can of worms, but hopefully, at least with my demonstration today, it increases the seriousness around not having somebody registered with MFA and what they can do to a Entra ID environment, even if they don't have any privileges in. So those attack vectors can really be rapidly expanded upon really, really quick. I'm just going to rapid fire through these here. I know we're up on time. So would limiting session length help mitigate this? You didn't see it in my demo, but no. And the reason why I say that is there is a switch that I could use with that V2 of token tactics called CAE. It's for conditional access evaluation. I've encountered session frequency before, and I'll use that switch. And then generally I can still work with my tokens or invoke a refresh. And that's a very, very low barrier entry where it's knocking me out completely out of systems. So that has not been an issue for me, especially whenever I go on tests. ZTNA, let's see, solution restricting traffic. I think where some of this is going, where traffic is really kind of coming from. So yeah, you can geofence and block people from like other countries and stuff like that, and that's totally fine. But attackers will just gravitate to residential proxies, especially in the U.S. if they're blocked, externally from a foreign country. I'd probably venture to say 9 times out of 10, depending on who's getting targeted and whatnot, they will probably pivot into a proxy device of some sort that is geographically located to where they are. So creating controls around or geofencing around certain areas are probably going to do very, very little to deter an attacker. So hopefully I answered that question for you at least right. How can Graph protected with third-party providers? So absolutely with third-party MFA providers, what I would just 100% recommend that if you're using a third-party provider and it's using any type of push notification with no geographic information, nothing where it's coming from, no number matching, no one-time passcodes, the likelihood is high if somebody slams a user enough that they're just going to relent, hit accept, and they're going to be in. So if any of those products are using that type of stuff, it's time to reevaluate. I'm not saying to get rid of it, but just make sure that you have controls in place that people either need to do some type of number matching or they're able to at least see some type of regional activity of where the login is really kind of coming from at a minimum. But usually I like to see 2 pieces of information that a user has to match together in order to make an MFA acceptance successful. IP restrictions. So if you are locating your IP restrictions through like a VPN or whatnot, that is company like on premises, that gets a lot more tough. That's where we're talking about more advanced scenarios of cloud pen testing where I'm not going to be able to pivot from the outside, and instead I'm going to have to compromise from within, either via C2 communication or whatnot, so I get some proxy tunneling going. Because what I'll do with the proxy is I will start tunneling traffic coming from the company premises, on-premise area, and that'll still end up bypassing some things. But that raises the bar to an external attacker if you are limiting IP address scopes to like a corporate public IP. If you lock down access to only administrators for Entra, would that be one of the defense mitigations? So, yeah, no. I highly suggest there is a conditional access policy for administration portals that I highly recommend that you do in place MFA. In an ideal world with administration portals with MFA, you're using at least something like FIDO2 or increasing that authentication strength where it's just not authenticator. I have to have like a physical hardware device. That'll definitely limit some options, but it won't effectively. If I have a token on the back end, I'm still going to be able to extract stuff out of that Entra ID environment from that way. So main plain thing to just think about there is MFA everybody. Get into your security panel in your environment and look at the registered, the methods that are registered for your users, and look and see if anybody is not registered. So and get those users registered. That's probably my number one best defense on controlling who gets access into Entra ID, either from the GUI or the back end of the token. So this last one, the new Outlook app is rumored for data stealing. I really haven't read too much into the new Outlook apps. So I don't know if I could really give a really good answer really kind of at that point, because I really haven't looked into abusing the new Outlook app. If you don't follow me on Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it these days, I am RootSecDev on Twitter. If I end up coming across something like that, I definitely like to blog about certain things, unless it's an MSRC situation, then obviously I'm not going to. But if it's something that is a bypass that somebody can obviously mitigate, I'll definitely blog or post about it. But I'll look at the new Outlook app and just see if there's anything I can abuse with it. But yeah, unfortunately, I can't answer that question here today.
No, perfect. Awesome. Edwin, I appreciate you running through the very quick rapid fire Q&A.
Yep.
It probably saved us all a lot of time in typing later. For everybody that joined us today, thank you very much. Again, Faith, Edwin, thank you for joining me today. And we will see everybody next month for the next Tradecraft Tuesday. Hope everybody has a wonderful day. Thank you.